It's about 8:30 on Saturday, December 14th, 2019. I was prompted to give another talk video. There's reasons, I suppose, why I don't really want to. I mean, it wasn't an orderly request, you know. It was more like as though somebody was coming through the computer with you know what I mean. And there's some question, you know, as to whether what motivates wanting to hear me and see me talk about what I think comes from people who actually want information, or whether it's from people who would rather cloud the information. What I mean by that is, they might argue, you know, I'd like to see his face, I'd like to see, you know, his tone, hear his tone, evaluate it as a form of special effect. I'm having a little bit of computer problem here. Okay. Evaluate as a form of special effect, maybe lie detection. I think it needs to be remembered that people who have that frame of mind that I'm lying about the whole thing, or that it's entertainment for them to hear me talk, or the people who put a neuroplastic into my face to fabricate the idea that they were detecting lies or something, which is a strange and unruly thing for them to be doing. So I took this on. It's 8:30 in the morning. I suppose it's not too early for my voice to be booming around the apartment building, where I'm usually quite quiet. Being a deaf person, I can't hear myself. This may be a waste of time. Somebody needs to get back to me and say whether or not I came through, whether you can understand me, whether you can hear me. I'd rather be writing. The same people who organize this prompt that I get on the air with another video are people who pore over every word of what I write. You know, it's not as if any of them are going to be specially informed by my being able to talk about these kinds of things. But I'm going to go ahead with the video. It's liable to be a somewhat long one, you know. And there's something I want to emphasize about what I'm doing, which is that, for one thing, you might notice my steampunk attire. I think it's an appropriate attire for the Extinction Rebellion, which I consider myself part of. I do think people need to stop driving quickly. We need to cut down the electrical grid, stop the wars in CO2 industry, and reform our public schools with botany as a curriculum reform all across the board, get engaged in phytoremediation, and a mega trend of a botanical renaissance to intercept, you know, the slide into extinction at the critical point that it's leading to. But my talk is about something else, because that's not really my precinct. I investigated AIDS, and I proved that it was an attack and a weapon. And what I'm talking about today isn't entirely that. Because, you see, there's a difference between something that's proven and something that's merely suspected or has grounds for belief. And some of what I'm going to talk about today are things that I have grounds for belief in. But when you throw things like that into a clowniac society of the sort that we have, you know, the congressional jump and holler that's going on right now about Donald Trump and his impeachment is a good example. You know, it's not really about anything particularly salient to what Donald Trump has done. He suspicions about his involvement in the AIDS attack, the Kennedy assassination, and the major revision of moral purpose that's going on in the United States. It's more a diversion from those issues. And I'm in Seattle. Some of the leaders here are involved in that diversion, and I know they have secretly helped Donald Trump. Now, a person who doesn't like seeing things taken as proven when there's no proof, it's not to say the proof makes any difference to some people. I mean, I proved that AIDS was an attack, and it hasn't made very much difference to most people. But I'm not going to say that these things are proven, but there are people who will say, well, that's an actionable suspicion. It's not, but they'll act as though it is. And I want to talk about that. But at root, I'm more than protecting the innocent. I'm protecting the scruples of a society that believes in due process. You see, the change in moral purpose that's going on in the United States is an attack on the idea that we live in a moral universe. It comes from Adolf Hitler. There's a secret society, a sort of imperial wizardry going on. They aren't the president of the United States, they're more the president of media. And what they do is entertain people with contraptions and contrived paradoxes, so that they can keep saying, you see, the world isn't moral, Jimmy. The world isn't moral, Jimmy. It's just a joke to believe that the world is moral. And this is the sort of thing that was behind the assassination of JFK, which has been shown to have been by the pornography industry. When I was just a moral zygote, so to speak, in their Petri dish. And so we're dealing with a situation that's very complicated. And as a result of being very complicated, there's a lot of easy money that goes into cheap shots on the opportunity that the issues raise for people who want to be known as cheap shop artists, bumper sticker heads in a bumper sticker head society. And one of the leaders, it's well known by now, people who read me in my blog, StoryChecks.org, that Peter Gabriel has been a major antagonist for me from, the German, Green German Party segment of the people in England whose leadership he secured through his bizarre rock band Genesis that was parading around images of plague and rats and deformed, elephant men being chided on issues of their dignity. I mean, he's a real rapscallion and getting under the skin of somebody. And the way that he's treated me is criminally insane, but he would not have gotten away with any of this were it not for Seattle, Washington. And I think since I'm in Tacoma going to school at what they call a military-friendly college, Tacoma Community College, I should mention that I think that an undercurrent of this term, military-friendly, is criminal underworld-friendly. And it traces into Seattle and the University of Washington sociology program that worked out a lot of this stuff with Pitt, but it goes much deeper than any of that. It goes into the postal union, it goes into the Congress, it goes into the Fox News media, and deeply into Hollywood. And the Kennedy assassination, as one of the Bronsteins in Pittsburgh said about me, was you're all connected up. And it's easy to make a case that the utility that I'm being used for, the wiring of my home with spy cams to see me get dressed in the morning and things like that, are part of a attempt to characterize the invasion of privacy is justified as a form of mockery. We saw this in the old film MASH, where they lifted the shower curtain on the woman they were calling Hot Lips, and she suffered, and they confirmed, they said that she was a blonde. I mean, this is a sort of mentality problem that exists in the United States, where a man can be elected arguably because he said he grabbed women by the pussy. And the thing about all of this is that it's all connected up. If you look at why I believe some of the things that I do, that's one of the reasons. There are certain things that have affected me very personally. When I came back to Seattle, arguably at the prompt of Jay Inslee in the Northwest Asian Weekly, they poisoned me in the mouth. I'm going in, they found plaque in my jugular vein. Sound mental health has left their signature in a Chinese torture of a rattling that's constant in my ear that can't be stopped now. You know, you think they would be ashamed to do this kind of thing. They've been shown to have used a nerve agent on me. They've been shown to have deliberately deafened me. They were terrible hypocrisy about sex. They were sending in women to do anything at all, get engaged to be married to me, get pregnant, splattered the school with abortion photos, and then when I cried, they said it was sexual harassment. I mean, you know, you have to detect not just the Looney Tune angle of what's going on between me and the brokers at Carnegie Mellon and Pentagon Disney, where I met and briefly dated Ming-Na Wen, but also the adroit way that they're playing politics in the public domain by murder. You might have noticed that Jay Inslee withdrew his candidacy on the heels of the death of Circe Kennedy. And I've written a lot about that in my blog because I think she was murdered. And I think the reason for this is grounded in a decision by the UW sociology bureaucracy to laugh at the idea of the moral idea of the white man's universe in the United States. You know, the first Asian American woman to be elected to Congress was from my district in Seattle. I lived in Chinatown International District. Donnie Chin was murdered there while I was in Pittsburgh. I seem to have been tipped off. And it looked like Circe Kennedy was the same people doing it again and trying to make it look like it was an attack on the sociological construct of a Chinaman getting back at a white symbol and so forth. Wear your horns proudly, Barry Chad used to say when things went wrong for you. And it's like a manufacturer of the license, you know, it's like a blood debt manufacturer, you know. Before you kill another Kennedy, be sure to make it look like they owe you blood, you know. And that's the mentality that's at work in this stuff. And it's coming from a difficult to describe alliance that exists between the NAACP, Al Sharpton, and his friend Donald Trump working out of Warhol. That's the centrality of the brain trust that exists as a sort of syphilis thinking that they call Operation Medicine Man. We know from my blog and from the readings and from the data and the information that the people who behind AIDS are in leadership of the victims in Seattle, and the way they did that was by making me into an object of entertainment. Like, I get interviewed where people ask me about my experience as a victim of white violence in the Ku Klux Klan when I was on the side of the civil rights movement as a child. And of course, I'd always mention that some black kids saved my life from a terrible, terrible beating, that they didn't have to. And I'm thanked, oh, that's, you know, wonderful of them, and I agree with that, by the way. It was on almost surreal chivalry on their part. They were much younger than the gang. They were unarmed, the gang was armed, they didn't have to do it, no one asked them. But then to show that the white man's appeal to moral code is just psychology because he's living under a death row from Seattle queers, they go out and kill white, to show that they're not interested in this magnanimity shit, and that's the mentality that's at the root of this stuff. They have me marked for torture and death. That's what they're doing, and Penis Gabriel was behind this shit. He, gave me this wait until dark stuff, and, he brags about preying on people's fears, and his whole alibi for things like his friend's role in 911 and the anthrax was preying on people's fears and stuff. And it's all just entertainment, and it's your imagination, and you owe us John Lennon, but that was manufactured from all of the evidence, it seems. They gave me a brochure that says there's no such thing as objective reality, only what the jury believes. Basically, at the scene of Reagan coming out and waving to me the night before he claims Hinckley shot at him. And they had me back in Pittsburgh on my 18th birthday, arresting me for armed robbery. I just got home from the Governor's School for Poetry, and they're arresting me for armed robbery and showing me a picture of Ronnie Zazinski, who basically was in the gang that kidnapped and tortured me as a child. And they call for backup from the NAACP. Oh, he's just a sissy, right? And they're saying this was me, that I robbed somebody. It wasn't me. It was a picture of Ronnie Zazinski. What the hell is going on, right? So they have all of this stuff going on. And they're playing it and saying it preys on people's fears. Well, that's neat, but that's Penis Gabriel's psychodrama. And he's projecting it on me through a gang that call themselves things like Brett and Leonard and Hidden Pun. And they have slogans like, everybody's crazy, we're just the ones who got caught. And they hotwire Gail Burston through the airwaves as part of his Mind Blender program. He sees himself as a voodoo wizard in the AIDS attack with a priestly doctrine of getting people afraid of him. And the thing is that the root of this stuff is a sort of carnal mentality towards entertainment. Sadism is entertainment. Back in France, some of the conspirators made a movie called Manon of the Spring, where they found out that, the person who they were cheating was somebody very beloved to them. And this was the moral of the story. The early moral of the story on this issue was Melvin Belly, who was Jack Ruby's attorney's appearance on Star Trek's and the children's show Lead. They were gathering around the person who they saw was their hero, and they wouldn't listen to anybody but him, and it turned out he was betraying them. And they would never listen to anything like that. And that's the way Seattle queers are. They're entrenched deeply in the idea, you must die by AIDS so we can hear your Frankel think on the logo Ray-Pine issue. And that comes from the people who released the virus, and they're just in denial about it because they don't want to admit that they were deluded. They don't want to admit that I was there at the right time for timely warning, the way Greta Thunberg is. I mean, you have a situation where there's so many people have piled on in an act of Nazi aggression saying it's cool. This is just a sissy that no one is even willing to bother to try to stop it at this point. It goes back to JFK. It isn't so much that it's about JFK. I mean, the idea of the moral dimension of human society coming from JFK's mind is ridiculous. It came from his heart. We're not talking about defending JFK. We're not talking about patriotism to the United States. We're talking about the basic ideals of human civilization. The idea of democracy, the idea of Christian ethics where every man counts for something, the idea from Sharia that we're all connected up and meaningful before Allah, the ideas of people having specific connectivity to the universe to which they are answerable and for which they should fundamentally thank the universe, because it's all been given to us in that sense. And the Cosa Nostra, or the Nostradamus of UW sociology, angles towards that as a different dialectic. You know, they like dialectics between paranoid and poison, between yours and mine, and, you know, the tug of war, push me, pull you, that penis Paul McCartney always talks about in his stuff. You know, what we're dealing with, I think, though, is about JFK in the sense that these people killed him. Like, JFK was a very brave man. You don't really have anything in Donald Trump's dossier that equals the way that he brought somebody from a disaster of war where his boat was shot up, who was wounded by dragging him in the teeth as he swam, to safety on an island. He didn't just save himself. He took the trouble to try to save a crew member, which might have drowned himself. You can be weak. It's not easy to swim in an ocean current with dragging a man. It's ridiculous to say this person who became our president was just a, you know, womanizer, which is what they've tried to pull. And where that's coming from is the Nazi end of the pornography industry, sadly enough. In a vice script with the sheriff of Dallas, who was like the man, Henry Wade, who brought the Roe versus Wade thing before the law that led to he supposedly lost. I mean, they were setting up this Venus flytrap, they call AIDS, in the pornography industry. I mean, it's pretty sly stuff, you know, and they want to say, oh, well, you're not moral neither, man, so give us a break. Hitler was right all along and all of this crazy stuff. And that's where it's coming from. And it's coming from black people, believe it or not. You know, they parade themselves as Christian ethics on one side of their mouth, but what they're out to is to knock out a white. That's what gives them a charge, you know, and there's also ingredients that confirm this. I'll give you an example of something my scruples forbid me to say you should believe, because I can see why you would balk at believing this. But there's a school called Bailey Gatzer. Now, I know and can prove it. They ran a Two Virgins pussy ball campaign, and we're supposed to keep sex from children. And the icon of parochialism in this was the tribute Japanese woman who the black man confiscated on pussy ball grounds after they set me up with this woman from India and all this sociology jazz. Okay, so you have this eugenic arc of justice scene. And we have a person named Aaron Bailey at the school library who comes in with Rosa Monteleone. And we know that Aaron and Rosa are the names of the Green Party leaders and so forth. So Gatzer is spelled like cats, which is Gabriel's game name for the Cats game of the Trump in the Cat's Foot Iron Claw of the Operation Death Seed, if you're familiar with the Pies and Ed Oz and Robert Lee pornography lyrics of Penis J. Sinfield. You would know they were living in the Dakota with Lenin and Boris Karloff, and in Laurel Canyon with Houdini and Errol Flynn, who was the go-between between Hitler and Ronald Reagan when they staged Lenin's disappearing act to give Yoko Ono dibs in a blood claim over the United States of America. That's what happened. Gatzer, Bailey, Aaron gets her. He gets her, see? And if you look at the Trump archives that were released in 2018, you find that in 1964, the keepers of this information at the Smithsonian and National Archives withheld, knowingly in 1964, information about a man named Frank Sturgis. What's going on? He was one of the Watergate burglars. You're telling me this was all properly investigated? That should have come out during the Watergate hearings. We have these papers about this guy from the Kennedy assassination. What's going on here? Well, the thing is that Frank S. is very important because Frank Sinatra was the one who was setting this up and advising the Beatles as a go-between Errol Flynn and John Lennon when Capitol Records was in Dallas at the time. And although JFK was really very, very brave, these people were daring do's. I mean, Jackie Kennedy appears to have administered the fatal headshot, and that's not propaganda. You can see something in her hand in a letter to Allen Dulles, who was on the Warren Commission, about hidden weapons. And Cliff Robertson, who starred as Kennedy in PT 109, the movie, swiped his image, said he was him, and then starred in the premiere episode of Outer Limits, which is all that talk about, we now give back your television set, you know. It was delayed for Kennedy's state funeral, that episode. So the Warren Commission is like, you know, the Outer Limits and the president of media taking over your television set. And then he went above the World Trade Center for the 9/11 attack. So these people were very daring do. And Bowie was calling for, you know, a Nazi revolution in the name of King Edward, and spelled out what they were doing on Diamond Dogs, which was supposedly entertainment, but it indexes directly to the Burstyn script, and they're protecting Gail Burstyn. You know, and Gay, how's that for a name? Gay, ill, Christmas caroling, bomb Burstyn. Gay, ill, Carolyn Burstyn. It's as bad as church ill in this stuff. You know, and King Edward came here in the 20s saying he wanted Hollywood to be in control of the Church of England. So America is foundationally under the control of the old Axis now. We're like Axis America. And that's a pretty serious mistake in my humble opinion. But when they look at me, they say, well, who are you to talk? You know, some of this may have come from your family. If you look back here, you can see a picture of my grandfather. He was on the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. He was in Wichita, Kansas. And in 1955, we see in Life magazine, which shows a woman, an Islamic woman on the cover. You know, there's an article about, let's see if we can get this on the camera. See, the key word there is ward. And 10 million of us. Okay, so the question is, in some ways, is this stuff encrypted to imply? See, I could show you something else from old Ward, who was a distinguished citizen of Poplar Bluff, Missouri, and the editor of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Now, I digress a little bit, but penis Fripp is all over me to grab that, because I visited him. I visited Ward when I hitchhiked out to St. Louis to hear Fripp play. So he's like, oh, that's sacred karma property of King Crimson and shit. But the St. Louis Post-Dispatch has been highly irregular in censoring me. But if you look at some of the archives about Ward, one of the things you find is there's letters about him. I thought I had them here. Yes, I think I do. Here's one. It calls him the Miami Herald. This was World War II. The Miami Herald's secret weapon. So what's this about a secret weapon? And why are people more interested in property than they are about what really happened? Martha Gellhorn wrote to me at one point. Okay. And the Pitt and the Secret Service were so upset they confiscated it. I don't have that to show you anymore. But you could see an image like Poe on the cover of this. I posted it in one of my websites. Over here on the side where, you know, there, right there. These are the people who did the cover for Sgt. Pepper, in which Aleister Crowley appears. And it's all laced in their media. So, when you look at Frank Sturgis and Bailey Gatzert, you see not only the Frank S of Frank Sinatra, but I once did a word game on the style of Peter Sinfield to Starkey's name, you know, because Starburst is a tang like candy, which implies east-west, and Burston and Starkey, you know, sort of collude. So what happens when you take Starkey and twist it? You get Keystar. Did I know anybody named Keystar? And I knew somebody named Gester, which is very similar to that. Carrie Gester. Now, Carrie comes through all of this stuff. Penis Gabriel's Preying on Fears was used in something they were calling Medicine Man, which was the drama of blowing things up, killing symbolisms, making this arc of colors, an arc of victims, and saying nobody gets out of here alive and stuff. So you have this carry the virus. These are carriers. You know, they have in Pittsburgh where the Auschwitz-like looking Iron City Brewery is a carrier bridge, you know, bridge of meaning, bridge of sacredness, of this, you know, Frankenchrist Taliban that Penis Gabriel whipped up as an arts council that he conjured out of like this idiocracy of the idea of my wanting to be married. Man, I was hunting a virgin, and that's a no-no, because they were defending virginity, you see. And, I mean, it's a pathology that comes from the parochial psyche. It's very devious. You have Greg Carl writing things like, the persona is subjected to successive degradations of the X motive, then subsumed into a larger structure dominated by its adversary. And Steve Langer, you know, they used the name Langer for Walter Langer because it was a sex change idea, you know, to make Jimmy effeminate. Hey, we're not sorry for anything with the dead, but we're sorry that it was you. You know, we love you, we were your friends, but we had to do it. Somebody had to play this role, and so forth. But Geister and Sturgis are very similar. Starkey, Geister, Starkey, and it comes from the Holocaust survivor community. So you have Gaster and Kister. Gester and Castor. You see, that's their idea. That's what these people saw as the nature of man under Adolf Hitler. And we want to bring this back. That's asking a lot of your paranoid deaf poets. No, thank you. I'd rather not.